Gastrointestinal. So this is Unit 6, Gastrointestinal. The gastrointestinal tract is the usual site of nutritional intake, including breakdown and absorption of nutrients and excretion. There are several disease processes and illnesses which affect this system. Drug classes which are used to treat disease processes and illnesses of the GI system, along with applicable laboratory tests and patient education, are discussed. So here are your objectives, and these are your reading assignments. So definitely review your anatomy and physiology of the GI system as needed. And then these are the chapters to read in case you need more information. So let's do a quick review of the GI system. So these are the major organs in the GI system. You have the esophagus, stomach, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, the small intestine, and large intestine. The esophagus moves food via peristalsis into the stomach, right? So this is all continuous and it sends your food to the stomach. So food enters through the cardiac esophageal sphincter, which is located here. That said sphincter remains closed except during swallowing to keep food contents within the stomach, which makes sense. So the stomach is connected to the esophagus and small intestine. Pyloric sphincter controls the emptying of the stomach. So the function of the stomach is basically digestion and acid-base balance. So for digestion, the stomach secretes hydrochloric acid, which aids in digestion and as well as barrier to infection. And when it comes to acid-base balance, the stomach secretes bicarb, and which is a base that is a natural mechanism to prevent hyperacidity. Next is the liver. The liver has different functions. So it's a storage, it is for protection, and it's also for metabolism. So the liver as a storage stores blood, vitamins, and minerals. And for protection, the liver filters toxins, alcohol, and drugs. And for metabolism, the liver helps metabolize carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. It secretes bile, which then gets stored in the gallbladder. And bile is basically very important when it comes to digestion in order to help the absorption of fats. Its other function is also to eliminate hemoglobin from destroyed red blood cells in the form of bilirubin, and the route for elimination of excess cholesterol as it's converted to bile acid and eliminated in bile. Pancreas, on the other hand, also aids in digestion and glucose control. So digestion, it is its exocrine function. So what does that mean? So pancreas produces or excretes enzymes to digest food, which includes lipase, which promotes fat breakdown and absorption, as well as amylase, which helps digest starch. When it comes to glucose control or endocrine function of the pancreas, in here it produces or secretes pancreatic hormone called insulin and glucagon, which helps in controlling blood sugar levels. The small intestine consists of the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. The main function of the small intestine is for digestion and absorption. In digestion, enzymes in the small intestines aid to break down carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. When it comes to absorption, so it's mostly food absorption, but in addition, it also absorbs water, vitamins, and minerals. And so from here, it goes to the bloodstream or the lymph nodes or lymphatic system. The large intestine, on the other hand, its function is also absorption and elimination. So in absorption, so it continues absorption of nutrients and reabsorption of water. And also, afterwards, it helps with elimination. So in here, the stool is formed and elimination of indigestible materials such as fiber, carbohydrate that the body cannot break down and digest. And in addition, it also acts as an appetite suppressant. As we know, our anatomy changes as we age. So what happens in the GI system as we age? So there are three things that I want you guys to remember: atrophy, decreased peristalsis, and decreased enzyme activity or synthesis. So atrophy happens over time, so it's a gradual decline in effectiveness, and basically it wastes away due to the degeneration of cells. Now, decreased peristalsis, basically peristalsis becomes less effective, and as we can remember, peristalsis is involuntary constriction and relaxation of the muscles of the intestines in order to help move or push food contents forward. And lastly, the decreased enzyme activity and synthesis. So basically, as we age, the functions of the different organs, the enzyme activity goes down. Gastric acid production. So gastric acid production, how does it happen? Where is it coming from? Well, the parietal cells that are present in the stomach, right? So they're in the lining of the stomach, they produce and secrete hydrochloric acid. So this is the primary site of action for many of the drugs used to treat acid-related disorders. You also have the Chief cells that produce pepsinogen, which is an enzyme that digests dietary protein, and then mucous cells, so mucus-secreting cells, which serves as a protective coating against the digestive action of hydrochloric and digestive enzyme. The stomach is responsible for hydrogen production via the proton pump. So the hydrogen potassium adenosine triphosphate pump, or ATPase pump, this is the pump for transport of hydrogen ions, which is located in the parietal cells. So hydrogen ions are pumped out of the cell into the gastric lumen in exchange for potassium via the action of the proton pump, which then creates the acidic environment of the stomach. As mentioned earlier, one of the other functions of parietal cells include the production of intrinsic factor. So what is intrinsic factor? Intrinsic factor is a protein that helps your intestines absorb vitamin B12, and again, this is made by the parietal cells, which are present in the stomach lining. And as we know, vitamin B12 is essential in red blood cell formation, cell metabolism, nerve function, and production of DNA. So there are different receptors involved in gastric acid production. H2, which aids in acceleration of heart rate, and in the GI tract, it helps with gastric acid secretion. So H2, or histamine 2, it helps in stimulation and provides energy to proton pump to produce hydrogen ions. Acetylcholine and gastrin also has an influence when it comes to the gastric acid production. That being said, is not as significant as the histamine 2. That being said, let's recall what is acetylcholine and gastrin, right? Acetylcholine has different functions, but one of those functions include the contraction of smooth muscles, right? So this is a neurotransmitter that is involved in the parasympathetic nervous system. And in addition, this specific neurotransmitter also causes an increase in bodily secretions. Now, gastrin, on the other hand, is a peptide hormone, and again, it stimulates gastric acid secretion, right? But both of them, they have much less influence in comparison to histamine 2. All right, so function, right? So it is very important in this organ, right, to maintain the stomach pH around 1 to 4. So as you can see, it is very acidic. And again, as mentioned earlier, one of the functions of the GI tract or the stomach itself is digestion. And lastly, because of the hydrochloric acid, it also aids in the defense against infection, right? Because of that very acidic environment. One thing to keep in mind, although we've mentioned that hydrochloric acid helps with infection, there are also other substances that stimulate hydrochloric acid secretion, right? So couple of the things, right? Food can increase hydrochloric acid production or secretion. Caffeine, chocolates, alcohol, stress, large amount of fatty meals, and as well as smoking. And so that's why you may notice for yourself or even your patients or family members, right? Whenever they eat or they ingest those substances, they may start complaining of heartburn or acid reflux. So that's usually the reason why, because those food or substances stimulate the production of hydrochloric acid.